Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We're lifelong Catholics, and we do this all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to do a show introducing you a little bit more to Duchess Karolina Lanckoronska. We told you about her and showed you where she is buried in Rome. And she's a cousin of mine. And now we're going to talk to you about how she is a heroine for our times. And we're with Brother Alexis Bonolo.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure to do these programs, which are really informative and teach Catholics how to act as Catholics, and so many of us has forgot. And what better example for our age than Duchess Caroline, last of the Piast dynasty that ruled Poland for centuries, and a real heroine in a time and age where it was heroic just to survive, but to resist was just like beyond all imagining. And she was a feisty warrior. She opposed the Nazis. She opposed the Soviets. She fought for the rights of the poor, of the innocent. She was a fighter, and she went to the traditional Latin Mass, but she didn't sit around smoking a pipe and, talking about how to compromise with the government. It was not her.
So she was, let's get this right. She was born August 11th, 1898, and in Gars am Camp, Lower Austria. Her father was Count Karol Lanckoronska, and she was a history professor, an art history professor at the Lvov University in Ukraine, and she began her underground resistance work for the Polish resistance in Lvov. And you're going to hear some feisty tales.
And she was a member of the Red Cross, and she wrote her memoirs. So maybe her memoirs were published several times, but more recently in the United States in 2007, and they were reviewed in the Washington Post by a Jewish news critic. And that article kind of criticizes her for not writing a narrative that's around the Jewish narrative, that writing a narrative about what really happened. But the opening of that book review speaks, I think, very eloquently about her character. So, AJ, why don't you share some of that?
This is a fascinating book, though for reasons its author may not have entirely intended. Written in 1945, but just published in the United States, Michelangelo in Ravensbrück is a memoir of the German and Soviet occupation of Poland, but it is not the kind of World War II memoir we are used to. The author, who died in 2002 at the age of 104, was a wealthy countess, a professor of art history, a devout Catholic, a fervent anti-communist, and a member of the Polish underground. In 1942, she was arrested by the Gestapo, which sent her to a series of prisons and then to Ravensbrück, the women's concentration camp north of Berlin.
Okay, so this was a woman who achieved lots of things in life, and she didn't have to. She could have just hid herself away, and we're going to see some examples of her fiery character. I want to point out that on her shield of arms, her motto is Flammans pro recto, which is Latin meaning burning for what is right, meaning a flaming sword for righteousness. And we're going to see that she was way ahead of her time as a woman warrior. And today and the day we're doing the show is actually the feast of Saint Joan of Arc. So you're going to see a modern day Joan of Arc in her own way.
Yeah.
So she
The very
lived in.
yeah,
Oh,
so the very first time the Soviets started to cause trouble for her was in the winter of 1939. They came to her house to arrest her. She tells them off by saying, "Not just now, I haven't time. I'm due at the university."
so for those of you who don't know history, Poland had been oppressed by the betrayal of Prussia, Austria, and Russia in the 1780s, and it ceased to exist. And most of Poland was under the domination of the Russian Tsar. Russia was overthrown by the Communist Revolution. The Poles fought for their liberty, defeated the communists, even went so far as Kiev, and set up their own state. And they had independence until 39, when Germany created a pretext for war and in a matter of 8 weeks conquered the whole country. And signed a treaty with the Russians to divide Poland in half. So
Mhm.
she was in Lviv, which is, you might know by the Russian name Lvov, or the German name Lemberg. In Italian, they call it Leopolis, has different names, was on the Russian side of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty, which was the treaty between the National Socialists and the Soviet Union. So to think that Hitler and Stalin were enemies, that's not true. They were once allies. And she had the unfortunate uh, a life to live in an era in which her country was betrayed by enemies on both sides of the political spectrum and of the geographic map,
Yeah.
and with no help from anyone. And she was teaching as a professor of history in Lviv when the war breaks out and Russia moves in and annexes Western Poland. This was a shock to all the Polish. They figured, well, Western Poland, the Germans haven't taken yet. For some reason, they're not taking it. We'll be able to go on, live, and survive.
Yeah. Now, how the Russians did not do what they did here in this war in Ukraine. They just came in, like visitors, travelers, and just like, "Oh, okay, we'll go back, we'll come back." And more came in, and more came in, and more came in. All of a sudden, these pro-Russian groups started to prop up everywhere. And people were losing their homes, their houses, their farms, and everybody started to disappear. Then it really started. It was really then they were started going after intellectuals and stuff. This is where she's got her first trying being arrested, but that didn't work. And they're like, hey, let's move someone into our house. That didn't go over too well.
Yeah, so this Russian kind of like barges in and wants to start living in her house. And here's an unarmed woman living by herself. How does she handle it?
Same gusto as before, but this time she marches to his headquarters, orders him out, and he is taken out of the house.
What pretext did she use to get this guy out of her house?
That she has the right to be here, and the paperwork's are in order because she is a professor at the university, and the university professors' homes cannot be touched.
Okay, so she knew her rights and she fought it. And that takes a lot of courage, because at any moment that soldier just could have pulled out his rifle and shot her dead on the spot. And so that takes really daring. And her family was very wealthy and owned lots of land, even in eastern Poland. And she had this sorrow to see in the subsequent weeks to Russian occupation what was happening to these villagers.
Those villagers, they got the farmland from her father. They built it up into a nice, awesome farming community, and all of a sudden, one farmer came by and he's like, "They're gone, they're gone, they're gone, they're gone." Like, Get inside. Here's a warm drink. Calm down. Warm up. Now tell me what happened. They came in the middle of the night, rounded everybody up on trucks, and and they took them to Kazakhstan.
So this is one thing most of us have never heard about in World War II history, that the Soviets deported nearly 1 million Poles to Central Asia, many of them never to see their land or family again. And this is what Russia's doing now in Russian occupied parts of the Ukraine. They're just deporting people like
Mm,
livestock.
yeah,
And uh, unbelievable tragedy that the Poles have suffered. They're just like a crucified nation. And the Russians hate the Poles because the Poles are Catholic, and the Poles have never taken the Russian yoke.
yeah.
And so she ends up getting arrested and being put in what prison in Ivano-Frankivsk?
Yeah, she's arrested, put into the prison in Stanislav Ivan Frankovich prison. There she meets Hans Kruger,
So who was he in the prison?
SS Gestapo. He is the man who personally murdered the the professors at Lvov University.
You mean he did it with his own hands?
Mm-hmm.
So she was on his list. And did he torture her?
Yeah, in Ravensbrück later on.
Oh, she gets tortured. So he locked her in a really dark, damp cell. And what was some of the things that showed her feistiness in that cell? I mean, in the prison there at Frankfurt. Did she get sad, depressed? Did she let him threaten her? Did that freak her out?
He tried to do that, gave her not yet moldy bread. Gave him mm, some sort of brown liquid as a soup. Uh, they couldn't. They wasn't even a chamber pot. It was a pot for number one, number two bathroom.
And he tried to freak her out by confessing to her, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And what did he tell her about?
That I'm the one who shot and killed all your friends at Lvov University.
And he went into detail about it.
Yep.
So she remembered what she heard, and she made sure it got all written down so that at Nuremberg, Hans Kruger hung. And so she was feisty. And who finally got her out of this prison?
That would have been, oh, yeah. Let's go back here. Let's see here. Her distant cousin, the Italian nobleman and musician Rolfredo Catini, who, having heard of her arrest, interceded with the wife of the heir of the Italian throne. Himmler himself ordered her arrest after being uh,
Order to release.
ordered her release after being embarrassed by the remonstrations of the Italian government about her mistreatment.
Mm-hmm. So she ends up under the care of like a Polish commandant
Yeah,
who he was trying to get her out, and he was the one that wrote down what she heard about this Kruger's atrocities.
yeah,
But he didn't succeed, and she gets sent to Berlin and then to Ravensbrück, which is north of Berlin. And
yeah,
in Ravensbrück, they treated her pretty well, didn't she?
yeah. They were. I mean, she was put into a nice uh apartment, nice bedspread, nice bed, nice everything, and she's like, "You're not, you're not going to do this to me? I heard what you told the other Polish prisoners. What you think of them? I'm not. Treat me the same." And she went into a hunger strike.
So that they would treat her just like the average Polish prisoner who was a woman there. And that's really amazing. That's, that's humility, that's patriotism, that is compassion, how many members of the nobility would have done that? How members, any profession would do that? Most people would just enjoy it and say, well, that's your tough luck. I'm being treated better than you because I'm noble.
Mhm.
And it was there at Ravensbrück she was tortured.
Yeah, medical experiments is there that she couldn't, afterwards she couldn't have kids if she got married. So she decided not to get married, and you know that's that.
And she doesn't describe that in the book for obvious reasons, but that is like to survive that kind of torture and remain sane. That takes a really strong character. And she was released. What are some of the other famous quotes you can share with us, AJ, from her?
Yeah, sure. When Kruger got her into his office just to see if he could break her, and she kept asking him. He kept asking her, questions like, "Are you an enemy of the German Reich?" Yes, obviously.
Now, just think of the gumption to say that, the courage, the cockiness. Let me tell you, knowing that this guy's murdered all your colleagues at the university, most people would dissemble. They say, well, I don't agree with the government or the politics or your military things, but I have nothing against the German people. I love them. They produce great, you can imagine what people might say. Of course I am, obviously. That's really feisty. That's like, you know, beyond the envelope. And
Right.
for a woman, I didn't think you say a man would say it, but a woman.
And she's like, "So, are you proud to be in Polish?" Yeah. And she questioned himself. Does the Gestapo truly have any honor in their ranks or in the organization? He's like, "What honor is in a name?" Like, gotcha.
Now, before she was arrested by the Gestapo, then the reason why she was arrested is she got recruited into the Polish. She was deported by the Soviets when they took over Lvov, and she had to go to Krakow. And in Krakow, she was recruited by.
She was recruited by let's see here. Oh boy, I'm gonna butcher this guy's name. Father Teddy and Tedesius Fedorovich.
Okay, Father Tadeusz Fedorovich, and what did he recruit her into?
Becoming into the Polish underground resistance, and then she really took on a big risk. The Soviets know of her house. And they want to put guys there to, house there. So she used her house for meetings and to get things put into smuggling rings for getting things to where it needs to go.
Mhm.
At her
The,
house.
the Germans that was there, that was under German occupation. So she infiltrated what organization on behalf of the Polish underground?
The Red Cross.
And what did that enable her to do?
To go into to get all the paperwork she needed to go into the Gestapo prisons to hand it to bring in medical supplies, food, actual good food for the prisoners, and also meet and talk with the prisoners and see what things they needed.
So as to what? Escape?
Escape. Or, yeah.
This is a woman that doesn't fight, after everything she'd already been through. So that's what motivates her to get arrested, and then she spends the rest of the war in prison. She had the consolation of being freed by some fellow patriots.
Yep. It was part of this. Not. We're still searching this out. It was part of this free Second Corps Polish army, and how she knew it was them for some odd reason. They showed her. They showed the flag of their unit, which was the Mermaid of Warsaw. She's like,
Mhm. So as far as I could figure out, the Polish Second Corps, which really after its heroic service in the Italian peninsula in 44, 45, it was disbanded in 46, but perhaps part of its units were detached to help with occupation to free the Polish prisoners that were in German territory before Germany was divided by the Soviets. So
mm,
that's, and she ends up moving first to Freiburg, where her family lived, and then to Rome. She was art historian. She taught there at the university. And this woman she wrote her memoirs right away, so she wouldn't forget. But she was so humble, she wouldn't allow them to be published in her lifetime.
mm.
And well, AJ and I, just by, I don't know, how is it that you even heard about Duchess and last year?
Yeah. I was just I was just doing more family searches, and I came across her. I was like,
Mhm. Yeah, so AJ was reading about her on the vigil of the anniversary of her arrest by the Gestapo. And so the next day we did a video from her tomb in Rome, and she has a very humble tomb. And she seems to be forgotten about everyone. But since she was the last living heir of her family, inherited the wealth of all her brothers and sisters, she founded a foundation that supports Polish culture in Western Europe, and is quite well endowed. I think it's headquartered in London, but it
mm,
seems that she's been forgotten. So a great woman. Here's a woman who, contrary to the state of her life, really was a fighter. But when she was in the underground, she had her head underground leader in the Polish resistance didn't think much of her because he didn't like the nobility. So one day she confronted him, and
yeah.
her words should be written in stone. This is really wonderful. What happened, AJ?
So my immediate superior in the Polish Red Cross was at the same time my chief in the underground, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Sebesta, a neurologist and a man of great energy and intelligence. Had a splendidly distinguished record of service in the September campaign, during which he had taken part in the defense of Samok. Towards me, he had always behaved with the greatest reserve, and this reserve was quite clearly the reason for my inactivity in the resistance that infuriated me. I once succeeded in obtaining a rather valuable piece of information and duly reported it to him. He listened to me very attentively and replied with a trace of irritation, which surprised me. You have brought me an important item of information, acquired at considerable risk to yourself, and I was always so prejudiced against you. You never kept it a secret from me, Colonel, I retorted. He stood up and began to pace the floor. What do you think was the reason for this prejudice of mine? Since you never gave me a real job to do, it couldn't have been that I ever let you down. It could only have been something for which I am not responsible. My social origins, very likely. That's right. Now I've got you. I thought to myself, here was the country spilling its blood, yet these trifles were still creating barriers between Poles fighting for their country's freedom. If you did not like my class origin, Colonel, why did you never ask me what I myself thought about it? And if the trouble is the name, which wasn't my choice either, I consider that merely increases my obligation to Poland. If the name is well known, it's because the people of that name fought, and not at all badly, it would seem, since they were so often in command. They fought at all the periods of Poland's greatest needs, from the Battle of Grunwald to the Siege of Vienna. That's my family's background. And today, not wishing to bring shame on those ancestors, I'm entitled to ask for the chance to risk my life on a worthwhile job. It is any time for such nonsense as class prejudice. At that point, I had to break off my monologue. Adam Sebesta, standing in front of me, had taken hold of both my hands, none too gently, and began kissing them alternatively at high speeds. From that day on, he was one of my closest friends.
Here is really an ardent nationalist, a woman who takes pride in her family's honor, which is a lost value. When so many of us have grandparents who fought in the Great War or in the Second World War, risked their lives and limbs. And boy, someone threatens us and we put on a mask and hide inside our house and we don't do anything. Where was the Catholic resistance in the last 2 years? Zilpo.
Mm-hmm.
Even to advocate it, people looked at you like you were mad. This is how whacked out the world is. And this Duchess, you can be sure she wouldn't have stayed in her house. You can be sure of that. You can be sure she wouldn't be wearing, you know what? I can't say it
Mm-hmm.
because we're going to publish this on YouTube. So Duchess Caroline, a real example of Christian heroism for our age in a time of persecution when the entire state at times is your enemy,
Yep.
or in times of war where you're facing a genocidal enemy. So AJ and I have decided to take Duchess Caroline as a proud example of a heroine for our order in modern times. And I think a woman of this kind of virtue is probably in heaven. So if she can help us, may she help us. So especially here in the UK, what we would have never thought a year ago that our order would be opening a house in Poland and in Ukraine within 9 months. So maybe she has interceded for us up on there. But we wanted to share her life with you so that you can learn. And AJ is going to put a link in the show notes on how you can get a copy of her autobiography, because it is really great reading. This is the kind of Catholic literature we should be reading, not the stuff they propose to us in public schools.
Yeah.
And admire real virtue and real heroism for in recent times.
Yep. So this is Order Militaris Video TV signing off. Yes, well.
Daysville.